Snow slammed as the gate fell shut. The girl stood by the fence, her hands raw, while men in heavy coats waited for her to move. One step meant the road. The other meant the last roof she might ever know. She didn't beg. She lifted the bucket, set it down, and kept working, as if work itself could speak for her. A rancher watched from the porch. The town watched from the dark. Winter had no mercy left, and hearts were being tested. When a child has nowhere left to go, who will stand up for her? Subscribe, watch to the end, and comment the name of your city below. Snow struck like thrown salt. The wagon lurched, then stopped, and the hand on the rail shoved. The girl hit the road on her knees, breath knocked thin. The driver didn't look back. Hooves pulled away. The sound went small, then smaller, until the snow had it. She stayed down long enough for the pain to decide where it lived. When she stood, the world tilted white. Her bundle lay open, cloth darkening where the slush crept in. She gathered it, fingers stiff, and tied the knot again with her teeth. The road offered two things: town lights dim through snow, and fence posts leaning toward open land. Town meant questions. Town meant papers. She turned toward the posts. Wind skinned her face. Each step rang like a bell struck wrong. She counted them anyway. 1, 2, 3. The count kept her upright when the cold tried to fold her. A shape moved at the fence. Horse breath steamed. A man swung down, boots sinking. He took in the bundle, the bare hands, the way the girl stood too still. "Road's no place, Jamam," he said. Not unkind, not warm. She nodded once. She did not ask. Asking had a smell. He looked past her, as if expecting someone to claim her. No one did. He swore under his breath, then lifted her like a sack and set her before him. The horse started. The girl pressed her forehead to the leather and kept it there. "I don't want to fall." The ranch came out of the storm like a low-backed animal. Lights burned weak. Inside, the air was colder than outside until the man struck a match and coaxed flame into the stove. Smoke made her cough. He set a bowl down. It was thin, but it was hot. He pushed a blanket across the table. "One night," he said. "Morning, you move on." She pulled the blanket around her shoulders and nodded. She ate without sound. He watched the door while she did, as if the wind might learn how to open it. The girl took the broom from the corner and swept where the mud bled in. The man said nothing. She washed the bowl, hands red as apples, and set it to dry. When she finished, she stood and waited. Waiting was a skill. He took his hat off and rubbed the brim. "You work, you can stay," he said at last. "No questions. You hear?" "Yes, sir," she said. The words were small, but they landed. Dawn came late and blue. She hauled water until her arms shook, fed the hens, split kindling with a blade too heavy. The man watched from the doorway, measuring. When she stumbled, she did not cry. She set the wood again and tried. He nodded once, like a mark made. By noon, the snow eased. The road showed itself again, pale and long. A woman arrived with a satchel and a look that read ledgers in the air. She noticed the girl's hands, the way she stood to the side. The woman offered a strip of cloth without asking why. The girl took it and tied it tight. "You're keeping trouble," the woman said to the man. He didn't answer. Trouble had already decided where it slept. They went to town for nails. The shop went quiet. Eyes counted. A man with gloves too clean smiled and asked about the road, about work, about papers. The woman spoke for the man. The girl stared at a knot in the counter and learned it by heart. On the way back, a rider cut across and blocked them. "Child's unclaimed," he said friendly. "We're checking." The girl ran. Not far. Just to the church steps where a wreath hung, green against white, a bell rope stiff with frost. The bell did not ring. It waited. The woman's voice cut the space. The rider laughed and turned away, already thinking of other things. That night the man said, "Pack." The girl folded the blanket as if it were a letter she would never finish. She tucked the small, hard thing deeper into the seam of her coat and set the bundle by the door. "I can work." She did not say it. The storm came back hard. A calf bawled from the pen. She went without boots, slipped, found the wire biting. Snow filled her mouth. The man was there then, hauling, cursing, wrapping his coat around her shoulders. His hands shook worse than hers. "Don't," he said. The word meant more than one thing. He let her sleep by the stove. He set a second bowl on the table and did not push it away. A sprig of evergreen lay on the sill, brought in by accident, or not. The woman came again and said nothing about it. Days stacked, work stacked. The girl learned the place by touch, where the floor dipped, where the door caught. She learned the man's silences. He learned her habit of counting steps when the cold pressed. A paper came. The man read it once and burned it. Ash made a map on the hearth. "Time's time," he said to no one. The woman asked to see the books. He let her. Men came at dusk and opened the gate without asking. They looked at the water trough, the fence line, the girl. "Orders," they said. The man stood in the doorway. The woman stood beside him. The girl stood behind both and held her breath until it hurt. They left. For now. The girl took the woman a cup of tea she had learned to make. The woman smiled like someone who had decided something hard. "What's your name?" she asked. "Mara," the girl said, and surprised herself with how loud it was. Snow fell again. A hymn drifted from town, thin as thread. The bells stayed quiet. The road waited. The man set another bowl. He said her name once, careful. The night leaned in. The cold learned the house. It found the crack by the back door and the soft place under the window. It crept there every night and stayed. Mara learned it too. She fed the stove before dawn and counted the sticks. She learned how much heat a handspan of wood made, how long it held. When the flame leaned low, she leaned with it. Silas watched without asking. He had the look of a man who measured storms by the sound they made on tin. He set rules the way he set fences, straight, few, and meant to last. Work first. No running to town alone. No names after dark. The last one he said without looking at her. Bee came with paper and chalk dust on her cuffs. She brought bread and a pencil sharpened too neat for a place like this. She sat at the table and drew lines that made sense of numbers. She did not ask where Mara came from. She asked what she could do. "I can work," Mara said. It came out like a vow. Bee nodded. "Good. Then work will tell us things." Snow laid a second skin on the land. Silas broke ice at the trough with the back of an axe. Mara carried chips away and felt the sting go up her arms. She did not shake her hands. Shaking wasted heat. When the wind cut, she turned her face and breathed through cloth. I will stay. A rider passed the gate and slowed. Clean gloves, a smile that did not need warming. He lifted 2 fingers in greeting, then let them drop. Silas did not lift his hand back. The rider's eyes found the waterline, then the house. They stayed there a second too long. Time's short, B said that night, looking at the books. Shorter than he says. Silas shrugged, a movement that carried weight. Time's always short. Mara took the chalk and rubbed the hearth clean. Ash came off in white lines like frost. She wiped again until the stone showed. In the seam of her coat, the hard thing pressed her ribs. She moved it lower. She did not look at it. Looking made it louder. They went to town for salt. The shop kept quiet again. The keeper set the sack down and slid it away, then back, then away, like he was teaching a trick to a dog. Cash, he said. Silas counted coins. They rang thin. The keeper's eyes flicked to Mara's hands. No papers, he said, as if stating whether. B's pencil tapped once on the counter. We'll bring them, she said, when the road opens. The keeper smiled the way men do when they hear a promise they don't believe. Outside, a bell rang once and stopped. Someone had hung a wreath on the church door, crooked, green against gray. Mara looked at it too long. On the road back, hoofbeats came from behind. The rider with clean gloves drew even. Child's business, he said lightly. County's tightening. Silas said nothing. B said, Not yours. The rider smiled again. Everything is, he said, and rode on. At the gate, Silas shut the latch harder than needed. He stood there after, hand still on iron. Pack, he said. Mara did it fast. Fast kept the sting down. She folded the blanket the same way as before. She set the bundle by the door and sat on it. She did not cry. Crying called men. The storm came back at dusk. It came low and loud. A cow bawled, then went quiet. Mara moved before Silas did. She knew the wire now. She knew where the snow drifted deep and where it hid holes. She slipped once and laughed, a small sound that surprised her. The laugh stopped when she saw the calf down. She crawled. She cut the wire with cold fingers and blood warmed the blade. She hauled. Snow filled her sleeves. I won't let go. Silas was there. Breath loud. Coat open. He lifted the calf like it weighed nothing and carried it to the shed. He wrapped his coat around Mara and held it closed with one hand. His other hand shook. He said nothing. The calf lived. Back inside, B set water on and pressed cloth to Mara's cut. She worked the way she wrote. Clean, exact. You should have called, she said. Mara shook her head. Work first. B smiled just a little. You're learning the wrong lessons. Silas put another bowl on the table. He left it there. He did not say morning anymore. The paper came the next day with a seal that looked like it had been bitten. Silas read it twice. B once. Mara watched the ash in the stove curl and break. They'll come with men, B said. And a reason. They always do, Silas said. They came at noon, boots on snow, voices that knew how to fill space. They looked at the trough, the fence, the calf's pen. They looked at Mara last. Unclaimed, one said. not unkind. We're obliged. Silas stepped forward. He did not raise his voice. You're not obliged here. Bee held up a hand. We'll answer, she said. With paper. They laughed. Laughter carries farther in cold. Mara felt the seam burn. She thought of the road and the wreath and the bell that had not rung. She thought of counting steps and how counting kept you upright. She did not speak, not yet. They left a mark on the gate and a time in the air. After, the house felt smaller. Bee laid the books out and made columns that leaned like fences after wind. There's water rights buried, she said. Old language, older lies. Silas leaned over her shoulder. He smelled of smoke and iron. Can you dig it out? I can, Bee said, if it's there. Mara brought tea. She set the cups down where the light hit them. Steam rose. The sprig of green on the sill had dried and curled. She straightened it. She counted the days by the way the light moved. That night, the bell rang again, twice. The sound came thin through snow. Bee paused with her pencil. Silas closed his eyes. Mara put her hand on the table and felt it steady her. Christmas, Bee said, not smiling. Silas nodded. Doesn't stop men. No, Bee said. Sometimes it slows them. The rider with clean gloves came back alone. He stood where the road met the gate and did not dismount. Sign, he said, and held out a paper. Keep the child warm somewhere else. Silas did not take it. Bee read from a distance. That language is wrong, she said. And you know it. The rider's smile thinned. Deadlines, he said. Are deadlines. Mara watched his gloves. They were clean, too clean. She looked at his boots. Mud there. She followed the mud with her eyes to the trough and the place where the water ran slow. A thought knocked. She pushed it back. Not yet. After he left, Silas broke ice again. Harder this time. He struck until the sound changed. Pack, he said, and this time the word hurt him. Bee put a hand on his arm. Not yet, she said. Give me 3 days. Silas looked at Mara. He said her name once, careful. 3. Mara nodded. She went to the shed and counted boards. She traced lines in dust where wheels had turned when they shouldn't. She touched the seam and felt the hard things settle. I remember. Snow fell soft. The wreath in town hung straight now. Someone had fixed it. The bell did not ring. The road waited. Inside, the stove held. 3 days leaned close. The 3 days did not pass. They pressed. Mara woke before light and went to the trough. The ice there held a gray sheen, thicker than it should have been. She skimmed it with a stick and sniffed. The smell was wrong, sweet under cold. She straightened and looked where the rider's mud had darkened the snow days before. The track had softened, but the turn was still there. A wheel cut that did not belong to farm work. She fetched a tin cup and dipped it quick, then hid the cup behind the shed where the wind laid low. I know this. The thought landed heavy. She wrapped the cup in cloth and tucked it beneath boards. Silas came out with his coat half-buttoned. He took one look at the trough and swore. He broke ice with the axe and watched the water crawl back slow, reluctant. We'll haul from the creek, he said. No one drinks this. Bee arrived with her pencil and a look sharpened by sleep she didn't get. She set her satchel down and listened while Silas talked. She didn't interrupt. When he finished, she nodded once. "Water rights," she said, "and proof." Mara set the tin cup on the table and stepped back. She did not explain. Explaining made things slide. Bee smelled it and closed her eyes. "Good," she said softly. "Very good." The day went thin. Men passed the gate and slowed, counting boards and cattle like prayers said wrong. The shopkeeper sent a boy with a message that wasn't a message at all, just a look that said time. Silas sent the boy away with bread and kept his hands busy. Near dusk, the rider came again with his clean gloves and a new smile. He brought a second paper and a third reason. "Inspection," he said. "Holiday kindness." Silas stood in the doorway and did not move. Not today. The rider's eyes slid past him to the house. "Then tomorrow." Bee stepped into the light. "Bring a warrant," she said. "Bring ink that lasts." The rider tipped his hat like a joke and left. That night, the wind dropped. The sky went clear and cruel. Stars cut. Bee laid the books out and drew lines that boxed men in. "He wants the water," she said. "The language is old enough to hide a lie. If we can show he touched it, changed it." Silas leaned on the table. "He'll deny." "Men always do," Bee said. "We don't need his mouth. We need his hands." Mara sat on the floor and mended a tear in Silas's coat with thread she had saved. Her fingers moved without sound. When she finished, she folded the coat and placed it by the door. She looked at Bee. "The wheel," she said. The word felt like glass. She swallowed. "Turned wrong." Bee's pencil paused. "Show me." They went to the shed with a lantern held low. Mara traced the line in the dust where the wheel had chewed and lifted again. "Not farm," she said. "Too light." Silas crouched and pressed his thumb into the mark. He sniffed and nodded. "Same mud as his boots." The bell in town rang once, then twice. Not a call, a practice. Someone was learning. The sound slid across the fields and broke against the house. "Tomorrow," Bee said. "Church." Silas looked at her. "You want him loud. I want him careless." Morning came white and sharp. The house smelled of coffee and iron. Mara wrapped the tin cup in cloth and set it in Bee's satchel. She slipped the small hard thing from her coat seam into her pocket and pressed it flat. "I won't lose it." They walked to town. Snow sang under boots. The wreath on the church door had been straightened again. A candle burned inside, one flame against a lot of cold. Someone had left a bowl of apples by the steps, skins dull with frost. Inside, the benches filled. Men stamped and women folded hands. The rider stood near the front, clean gloves folded over clean hat. He smiled at Silas like they shared a secret. Bee waited until the hymn thinned. She stepped forward with her satchel and set it down where everyone could see. "We're here about water," she said. Her voice carried without trying. "And paper?" A murmur moved. The rider's smile held. Bee opened a book and read a line that sounded like prayer until it didn't. She read another, then another. She lifted the tin cup and set it on the rail. "Taste," she said. No one moved. Silas took the cup and wet his finger. He touched it to his tongue and spat. "Not ours," he said. The words cut. The writer laughed once. Accidents, he said. Bee nodded. Yes, she said. And fingerprints. She turned the page. She named dates. She named weights. She named the place where the wheel turned wrong. The writer's gloves flexed. His eyes flicked to the door and back. Bring him up, Bee said, and the man who broke ice for a living brought forward the small barrel they had hauled from the creek. It was clean. It shone. He tipped it, and the water ran true. The murmur grew teeth. The writer stepped back. Deadlines, he said, softer now. Let's be kind. Mara stood. The bench creaked, and then it was quiet again. Her mouth opened and closed. She pressed her thumb into the small, hard thing and felt the edge. Sir, she said, and the words steadied her. Your wheels. Silas said her name once, low. Bee did not look at him. Mara held up the thing. It was a scrap of paper folded until it remembered the fold. She unfolded it and smoothed it with care. This was sewn, she said. Here. She tapped her coat. He told me to keep it where fire can't. The writer's face went pale under the clean. Bee took the paper and read. She did not rush. A note, she said, about a lockbox, about where to put a hand so it doesn't leave a mark. The room leaned forward. The writer spoke then, fast. That's stolen. That's a child's lie. Mara shook her head. He died, she said. The words were knives she put down one by one. On the road. Silas stepped closer. He stood behind her, not touching. Bee held the paper up where the light caught the ink and showed its age. We can open it, she said. Now. The man who wore a badge stood and cleared his throat. We can, he said. His voice was small, but it was enough. They went to the shop where the lockbox lived behind a wall that pretended to be solid. It opened like anything does when it's done lying. Inside were papers that matched the lies and a key that matched the wheel turn. The writer did not run. He smiled again, thinner than before. Business, he said. Not today, Bee said. Snow fell as if it had waited for this. Outside, the bell rang once and stopped. Inside, a candle guttered and held. They walked back to the ranch slow. The world felt different without changing. Silas broke ice and it sounded right again. He set a bowl on the table and then another. He did not say pack. Bee set the papers to dry and smiled like someone who had set a bone. It won't end, she said. Silas nodded. Nothing does. Mara sat by the stove and counted the ticks of heat. She thought of the wreath and the bell and the apple bowl. She thought of the road that had not taken her. I am still here. Night leaned in. The flame held. 3 days had passed after all. The first quiet felt like a trick. Snow fell without wind, straight down, the kind that makes men listen for sounds that don't come. Mara fed the stove and counted the sticks. She counted wrong once and fixed it. Silas watched from the door, hand on the frame, eyes on the yard as if it might answer back. Bee spread the papers to dry and weighted the corners with a wrench and a hymn book she had found under the bench. The hymn book smelled of dust and pine. Someone had tucked a sprig inside long ago. Bee did not comment. She wrote until her fingers went numb, then warmed them on the mug and wrote again. They'll answer, she said, just not how we want. Silas nodded. They never do. The trough held clear through the night. That was the first sign. The second came at dawn, when the latch lay open and the gate hung crooked, as if it had been tested and found wanting. No cattle gone. No prince worth following. Just a question left where a door should be closed. Mara shut the latch and pressed it twice to feel it catch. She moved the bucket back to its place. Order mattered. Order kept the day from slipping. They went to town for flour. The shopkeeper slid the sack across without a look and said, "Cash." Softer than before. Silas paid. The coins rang heavier. Outside, the bell rang once and stopped. The wreath had lost a needle. A man stood across the street with his collar up and his hands empty. He did not move. He watched B's satchel like it was a wound he wanted to touch. When they passed, he turned away, too quick. "Not done," B said. "No," Silas said. Back home, the wind rose with noon and the sky went flat. Mara took the fence line and found a wire cut clean, ends bent inward. She followed the bend with her finger and felt the place where pliers had kissed metal. She wrapped it with a strip torn from her own hem and tied it fast. "I can fix this." The thought steadied her. Silas found the calf with its head down and breath short. He knelt and felt the mouth, the gums. "Drink," he said, and the word was an order to himself. He fetched water from the creek and held the bucket until the calf drank and drank again. The calf lived, for now. That night, a paper came by hand, not seal. It named a date and a place. It did not name a reason. B read it and set it by the stove to dry the ink, like a wound cauterized. "They want you alone," she said to Silas. Silas did not look at Mara. "I'll go." B said, "We'll go." Mara said nothing. She folded the blanket and set it by the door without being told. Her fingers shook. She made them stop. The meeting was in a room that smelled of oil and old prayers. A long table, men on one side, space on the other. Silas took the chair that faced the door. B stood. Mara stayed near the wall, where she could see shoes. They talked about numbers that leaned toward no. They talked about water like it was air and about air like it was owned. They talked about kindness with mouths that did not know it. The man with clean gloves smiled and set a pen down where it caught the light. "Sign," he said. Silas picked up the pen. He held it too long. The room leaned. B said, "Read the line aloud." The man laughed once. "It's standard." B smiled, thin. "Then read it." Silas read. The words slid and caught. Mara listened to the catch. She counted it. 1, 2, 3. Silas set the pen down. "No." The man with gloves stood. His chair scraped. "Deadlines," he said. Mara stepped forward before she knew she would. The word came out of her without asking. "Sir." It stopped the scrape. She pointed at the paper. "That line kills the creek." The men laughed, not unkind. "Child," one said. Mara shook her head. "The bend," she said. "Downstream. It freezes first." B did not look at her. That was the mercy. B said, "We have samples." The man with gloves closed his eyes for a second. It was small. It was enough. They left without shaking hands. On the road home, the wind cut. Silas said nothing until the house rose. "You shouldn't," he said then. not looking at Mara. "I know," Mara said. The words burned. I couldn't stop. The next morning, the snow came sideways. The trough froze fast and hard. The calf went down again. This time it did not rise. Silas stood with his hand on its neck until the breath went. He did not curse. He did not move. Bee put a hand on his arm. He shrugged it off and went to the shed. Wood split wrong when you hit it angry. The sound carried. Mara cleaned the pen. She worked until the cold cut through cloth and into bone. She did not cry. Crying would not bring it back. By noon, men came to the gate and did not ask. They opened it and walked in. Their boots were wrong for farm work, too clean. They looked at the trough and the pen and the dead calf. "Inspection," one said. Silas stepped in front of Mara without looking at her. "Get off my land." They smiled. "Court order." Bee held out the papers. "We'll read it together." They did not. They moved. One reached for the gate again. Silas's hand went to the wall where the rifle hung. He did not lift it. Not yet. Mara saw the glove catch on a nail. She saw the tear. She saw the skin beneath. She saw the ring, dark stone set plain. Her heart kicked. "Stop," she said. The word cracked. Everyone looked. She pointed. "That ring," she said. "The box, third shelf." The men laughed. One swore. The one with the torn glove went pale. Bee moved then, fast. "Sheriff," she said, and the word found a man who had been trying to be invisible. He stepped forward and cleared his throat. "We can look," he said. They did. The box held what boxes hold when men think no one will open them. Papers that matched hands and dates. A key that matched a wheel turn. The room changed shape. Outside, the bell rang. Once, then again, the sound came clean through snow. The men left without smiling. That night, the house held a different quiet. Bee wrote until the candle guttered, and then wrote some more. Silas sat with his hands flat on the table and stared at them like they were new. Mara set 3 bowls. She hesitated, then set a 4th. She did not know why. She left it. Bee looked at it and said nothing. They ate. The stew was thin. It was enough. Later, Bee found Mara by the stove with the hymn book open to a page that had been folded and unfolded until it remembered. "I can't read it," Mara said. "I can," Bee said. She read one line. Not the whole. Just the line about light. Silas listened from the door. He did not say amen. He did not leave. The snow eased near midnight. Stars cut. The trough held clear. Silas went out and checked the latch twice. He came back in and said Mara's name like a promise he did not yet understand. "I won't send you," he said. Mara nodded. She counted her breaths until they matched the stove. "I am still here." Outside, the road waited. Inside, the flame held. The quiet was earned. Morning came with a sound the house did not know yet. Not wind. Not hooves. A knock. It was careful. 2 taps. A pause. 2 again. Silas took the rifle from the wall and did not load it. He opened the door a handspan. A boy stood there with a cap too big and eyes that learned fast. He held out a folded paper and did not step inside. "From town," he said. He said, "Hurry." Silas took it and closed the door. He read once and handed it to Bee. She read slower, her mouth set. "They moved it," she said. "Hearing. Today." Silas nodded. "They want us tired." Mara tied her boots with hands that did not shake. She fed the stove and left it banked, the way Bee had shown her. She wrapped the hymn book in cloth and slid it into the satchel with the papers. The sprig on the sill had dropped another needle. She tucked it into her pocket without thinking. They went out into cold that cut clean. The road held ruts like scars. A wagon passed them and did not slow. The town rose gray and close. The bell did not ring. The room they took them to smelled of ink and old coffee. Benches scraped. Men stood because sitting would mean staying. The one with clean gloves was there. Gloves folded. Ring dark. He smiled at Silas like this had always been the plan. Bee stood and laid the papers down. "We're ready," she said. The man with gloves spread his hands. "We are too." They spoke of time. They spoke of notice. They spoke of mercy like it was a favor men grant when it costs them nothing. Bee answered with dates. She answered with weights. She answered with language so old, it felt like prayer when she read it aloud. Silas said little. When he did, the room listened. "That water is ours," he said. "It keeps animals breathing." The man with gloves tilted his head. "Animals die," he said. "That's the business." Mara watched shoes. She watched hands. She watched the place where the man's glove had torn yesterday and been replaced today. New leather. Same ring. Bee reached into the satchel and brought out the tin cup. She did not offer it. She set it down. "Still sweet," she said. "Still wrong." The man with gloves laughed once. It was a sound without warmth. "Coincidence." Mara stepped forward and felt the room tilt. "I can do this." She held out the hymn book. "It was behind the bench," she said, "in the shed." She opened it and showed the page where the paper had been pressed so often the ink shadowed through. "He used it," she said, "to hide." Silas said her name. It was quiet. It was a rope. Bee took the book and turned it so the light caught the impression. "Ink transfers," she said. "Pressure leaves a map." The man with gloves' smile thinned. "Child tricks," he said. "Then why replace the gloves?" Bee asked. Silence learned the room. The badge stood up again. He cleared his throat and did not sit back down. "We'll look," he said. The word was small. It was enough. They broke for the shop. The wall came open like it had been waiting. The lockbox opened and gave up its teeth. Papers fell into light and did not like it. Dates lined up. Names did too. The man with gloves took a step back. He did not run. He did not have to. Not yet. Outside, the bell rang once. It sounded different, closer. They walked home slower. Snow came soft and straight again. The road did not pull at Mara the way it used to. She counted steps anyway. Habit kept you upright. At the gate, a wagon waited. Not town, not clean. A woman sat on the bench with a shawl pulled tight and a look like she had swallowed something sharp. She did not smile. "County," she said. Temporary placement. Silas's jaw set. No. The woman shrugged. Paper says otherwise. B stepped forward and held out the fresh copy with ink still damp. Paper says wait. The woman took it and read. She read again. Her mouth went thin. I'll be back, she said, and turned the wagon without meeting Mara's eyes. The house exhaled. They ate bread and beans and what was left of the apples. B set the papers to dry and pinned them down with the hymn book again. Silas split wood until the pile looked like a wall. Mara mended until her fingers ached. She put the sprig on the table where everyone could see it. No one moved it. Night brought the sound back. Hooves this time. Many. They stopped short of the gate. Men called out. Not angry. Confident. We're here to inspect. Silas stood in the doorway. He did not lift the rifle. He did not step aside. Tomorrow, he said. A man laughed. Another spat. The one with clean gloves stayed back, hands empty, voice smooth. You're tired, he said. You'll sign. B's voice came from the table. He won't. The men shifted. A boot crossed the line of light. Silas's hand went to the rifle and stayed there. Not yet. Mara moved to the window and blew the candle out. The room went dark. Outside, the men cursed. Someone slipped. A horse stamped. The bell rang then. Not once. Not twice. 3 times. It carried far and clean. Windows lit in town. Doors opened. Church, a man said. What for? B smiled in the dark. Light, she said. They left. Not fast. Not slow. Like men who plan to come back with daylight. After, the house held breath. Silas set the rifle down and rubbed his hands. They'll try again, he said. I know, Mara said. The words surprised her. They did not hurt. B packed the papers and tied the string twice. We'll be ready. Snow fell late and quiet. The trough held clear. Silas checked it and nodded once. He set 3 bowls on the table and then stopped. He added a 4th again, and this time did not hesitate. Mara sat by the stove and warmed her hands. She opened the hymn book to the folded page and traced the line with her finger. B read the rest, low. Not the whole thing. Just enough. Outside, the road waited like it always had. Inside, the flame held. Men would come. Papers would move. Winter would press. Silas looked at Mara and said her name like it was a place. You stay, he said. Not as an order, as a fact. Mara nodded and counted the heat until it matched her breath. I am still here. The next morning broke wrong. No snow, no wind, just a sky like clean glass and a quiet that pressed. Silas stood at the door longer than usual, listening for hooves that didn't come. Mara fed the stove and counted sticks. She counted twice. The number didn't change, but the feeling did. B finished tying the papers and slid them into the satchel. She didn't hum. She always hummed when things felt steady. She did not hum now. They'll change the field, she said. That's what men do when they can't change the truth. Silas nodded. Where? B tapped the table. Jurisdiction, venue, a new reason with old ink. Mara took the bucket to the trough. The water held clear. She dipped her hand and felt the cold bite right. She pulled back fast and shook it once. She noticed the fence beyond. One post leaned where it hadn't yesterday. She pressed it upright with her shoulder and packed snow at the base. "I can hold this." A wagon came near noon. Not fast, not slow. It stopped short of the gate. A man climbed down with a roll of notices and a look that practiced kindness. He did not cross the line. "By order," he called. "Inspection moved. Town Hall, tomorrow." B stepped forward. "Moved by whom?" The man smiled and shrugged. "Paper says." Silas said, "Bring it." The man held it up from where he stood, just far enough. "You can read it there." B read it there. Her mouth went flat. "They're narrowing the door," she said when he left. "They want us to arrive late." "We won't," Silas said. That afternoon, the sky warmed just enough to lie. Melt crept under snow and froze again. Mara followed the fence line and found the wire cut clean a second time. She tied it with twine and pressed the knot flat with a stone. She tucked the twine tail into the post so it wouldn't show. She stood back and checked it from 3 angles. Good enough. A shadow moved near the creek. Too quick for a deer. Mara froze. The shadow froze too. Then it slid away, smooth. She waited a full count to 10 before moving. Habit saved breath. Inside, B spread a map she had drawn from memory. "If they claim the bend," she said, "they claim the freeze." Silas traced the line with a calloused finger. "We'll haul," he said. "We'll last." B looked at him. "At what cost?" He didn't answer. Night brought a knock again. Not careful this time. 3 taps, hard. Silas took the rifle and did load it. He opened the door a handspan. A man stood there with a paper and a breath that smelled of mint and smoke. "Notice," he said. "Temporary seizure. Effective immediately." Silas read by lantern light. B read over his shoulder. Mara watched the man's boots. Mud, fresh, creek mud. B said, "This contradicts yesterday." The man shrugged. "New day." Silas folded the paper once and handed it back. "No." The man smiled thin. "Then we'll be back." "Bring the badge," B said. The man tipped his hat and left tracks that Mara memorized. Sleep did not come easy. Mara lay by the stove and listened to the house learn its own sounds. A board popped. The wind tested the eaves. "I won't leave." The thought was a stone she held. Morning brought noise. Hooves. Many. Men at the gate with voices that filled space. The badge stood among them, uncomfortable. Silas stepped outside and shut the door behind him. "Court order," a man said, holding paper high. "Inspection." B joined Silas. She did not bring the satchel. She brought the map instead. "Read it," she said. The man began. B stopped him on the second line. "That section was repealed," she said. "You know it." The man looked at the badge. The badge cleared his throat. "We can check." Silas stepped aside 1 pace and no more. Not the house. They moved toward the trough. One man dipped a finger and smiled like he had found a trick. Another cut toward the creek. Silas followed him. B followed Silas. Mara stayed by the gate and counted boots. At the creek, the man bent and scooped water. "Looks fine," he said. B said, "Upstream." The man hesitated. Silas did not. Upstream, the snow lay wrong. Melt had run where it shouldn't. Bee knelt and pressed her glove into the bank. The imprint held and filled slow. "Here," she said. A man laughed. Another swore. The badge stepped closer and leaned. "We'll take samples," he said. The man with mint breath stiffened. "That's unnecessary." Bee stood. "So is lying." The badge nodded once. It was enough. They left with jars and looks that promised return. The gate hung straight. Silas shut it and leaned on it a moment longer than needed. That afternoon, the house filled with paper again. Bee wrote and wrote. Her pencil shortened. She sharpened it with a knife and kept going. Silas split wood until the pile looked like a wall built against men. Mara mended a tear in the satchel and found a new stitch she liked better. She practiced it on scrap until it held. She tucked the needle into her sleeve. At dusk, a wagon creaked in from town. It carried a crate and a woman with a tired face and a practiced smile. "Temporary," she said, "just to be safe." Silas stepped in front of Mara without looking at her. "No." The woman sighed. "It's Christmas week," she said. "There are rules." Bee held out the paper with damp ink. "There are also stays," she said. The woman read. She read again. Her smile fell away. "I'll be back," she said, and turned the wagon. The crate rattled. Mara watched until it disappeared. Inside, Bee let herself sit. "They're testing us," she said. Silas poured coffee and did not drink it. "We'll hold." Night came clear and cold. The bell rang once, then again. Not a call, a reminder. Someone practiced a carol nearby, the tune thin and brave. A candle burned in the window across the yard, where no candle had been before. Mara placed the sprig on the table and set it straight. She did not know why it mattered. It did. Footsteps came late. One set. Then another. A man stood at the gate alone. No paper. No smile. "Sign," he said softly. "And it ends." Silas did not move. Bee did not speak. The silence leaned. Mara stepped forward until she stood at Silas's elbow. "Sir," she said. The word was small. It stopped the night. "If it ends, where do we drink?" The man stared at her. He opened his mouth. He closed it. He looked past them to the dark where the creek lay. "That's not your worry," he said. "It is," Mara said. The words were steady. "I carry it." The man laughed once, sharp. "You carry nothing." Mara held out her hands. They were red and cut and steady. "I carry this," she said. The man's face changed. Not much. Enough. He turned and left without another word. After, Silas exhaled. It sounded like a door opening. Bee touched Mara's shoulder once and took her hand away. No more was needed. They ate bread and beans. Bee read a line from the hymn book again. Not the whole, just the part about light finding cracks. Silas listened and did not argue with it. Before bed, Silas added a fourth bowl again. He left it. He did not explain. He checked the latch twice. Mara lay by the stove and counted the heat until it matched her breath. She thought of the road and the gate and the water that still ran clear. "I am still here." Outside, the night tested the fence and found it held. The town woke before the ranch did. A bell rang once, then stopped, as if someone had tested it and thought better. Mara was already up. She fed the stove and counted the sticks. She set one aside, then another. The habit kept her hands from shaking. Outside, the sky held low and pale. No snow. Worse. Silas stood at the window and watched the road like it might blink first. "They'll come early," he said. Bea finished tying the satchel. She slid the papers inside and pressed the knot flat with her thumb. "They want us late," she said, "so we won't be." They left while the frost still held. The creek ran quiet. The trough shone clear. Mara touched the latch and felt it catch. She touched it again. "I will remember this." The town smelled of bread and coal. Doors opened and closed without greeting. People stood in groups that looked accidental and weren't. The hall lights burned too bright for morning. Inside, benches scraped. Coats came off and stayed on arms. The badge stood near the front with a face that had practiced neutrality and not learned it. The man with clean gloves arrived last. He did not hurry. He placed his hat on the table and smoothed it like it mattered. His ring caught the light and let it go. Bea stood when the room settled. "We're here about water," she said. "And about time." A murmur answered. Silas stayed seated, back straight, hands on knees. Mara stood by the wall and watched shoes. She watched who crossed their legs and who did not. The man with gloves smiled. "We're all neighbors," he said. "We want what's best." Bea nodded. "Then read the amendment." He laughed once. "Which?" "The one you're hiding," Bea said. The badge cleared his throat. "Let's proceed." They did. Words fell like snow, quiet until they weren't. Bea read lines that bent the room. She named dates. She named places. She named the bend where water froze first. She named the day the wheel turned wrong. Silas stood then. "My animals died," he said. "Because of that." The man with gloves spread his hands. "Coincidence." Mara felt the seam press her ribs and eased it. She breathed. She watched the man's eyes flick to the door when Bea set the jars on the table. Clear water. Tainted water. The difference did not need explanation. "Bring the witness," Bea said. A boy came forward with a limp he tried to hide. He kept his cap on and stared at the floor. "I drove," he said. "I was told where." The man with gloves smiled thinner. "Lies," he said softly. The boy swallowed. "I saw the ring," he said. "I was paid." The room leaned. Someone swore. Someone else said a name that wasn't kind. The man with gloves stood. "Deadlines," he said. "Let's be done." "Not yet," Bea said. Mara stepped forward. The bench creaked. She hated the sound. "I can do this." She held up the folded paper and opened it with care. "This was sewn," she said, "so fire wouldn't take it." The man laughed, quick. "A child's—" She cut him off without raising her voice. "Third shelf," she said. "Left hinge. The box sticks." Silence learned the room. The badge turned. He did not look at the man with gloves. "We can check." They did. The wall came open again, like it remembered. The box opened. Papers breathed air and did not like it. Ink matched ink. Dates matched days. The ring matched the mark on the wax. Outside, the bell rang. Once, then twice. It sounded like a decision. The man with gloves did not run. He sat and smoothed his hat. "Business," he said. "Crime," the badge said, and the word surprised even him. They took the man's gloves. They took the box. They took the time he had been spending. When it ended, it did not feel like an ending. People left in pieces. Doors closed. The room cooled. On the steps, the woman from the wagon waited with her crate. She read the paper B handed her and sighed. "Another week," she said. "At least." Silas nodded. "At least." They walked home with the sun low and pale. Snow threatened and thought better. The road felt shorter. Mara counted steps anyway. Habit kept her upright. At the gate, Silas stopped. He rested his hand on the post and did not move. "I should have sent you," he said, not looking at Mara. She shook her head. "You didn't." He nodded once. "Good." Inside, Bee set the satchel down and let her shoulders drop. "This buys time," she said. "Not peace." Silas poured coffee and drank it this time. "Time's enough." They ate what they had. The stew was thin and good. Bee read one line from the hymn book again. The same line. Light in cracks. She closed it and set it by the sprig. Night came soft. Snow finally fell, slow and straight. The trough held clear. Silas checked it and smiled without showing teeth. Mara went to the window and looked at the road. It lay quiet. She pressed her thumb to the seam and felt nothing sharp now. The paper had done its work. The knock came late. One tap, a pause, one again. Silas took the rifle and did not load it. He opened the door a handspan. The boy with the limp stood there, hat in his hands. "They said I should go," he said. "I didn't want to." Silas stepped aside. "Warm up," he said. The boy came in and stood by the stove, shaking. Mara handed him a bowl. He took it with both hands. Bee watched and said nothing. Later, when the boy slept on a bench with his cap on his chest, Silas added another bowl to the table. He did not hesitate. He did not explain. Mara sat by the stove and counted the ticks of heat until they matched her breath. She thought of the bell and the box and the water that still ran. "I am still here." Outside, snow laid a clean skin on the land. Inside, the flame held. Snow finished what night began. It fell thick and slow, the kind that makes distance lie. By morning, the ranch wore a new shape. Fences blurred. The creek whispered under skin. Mara fed the stove and counted the sticks. She counted again when one split wrong. Outside, a crow sat on the post and did not move. Silas stepped into boots still damp from yesterday. He worked them on without cursing. "We'll haul early," he said, "before it deepens." Bee folded the satchel and tied the string twice. She slipped the hymn book inside and pressed the knot flat. "They'll answer with weather," she said. "Men do when ink fails." They moved cattle slow and quiet. Breath smoked. Hooves sounded wrong in the snow, muffled, like they were stepping on cloth. Mara took the rear and kept count. One lagged. She clicked her tongue and guided it back. Work first. At the creek, the ice sang thin. Silas tested it with the axe handle and found give. He set boards down and crossed light. Mara watched the water run clear beneath. She smiled without meaning to. Then she smelled it again. Sweet under cold. The smile went. Bee knelt and skimmed with a jar. "Upstream," she said. They followed the bend where the bank leaned and melt crept where it shouldn't. The snow there wore footprints that did not belong to animals. Not heavy enough. Not honest. Silas followed them with his eyes and said nothing. A wagon stood beyond the trees, empty now, its tracks sharp. The crate marks in the bed told a story without words. Mara pressed her boot into one and felt the give. "I know this. They hauled water anyway. You did not wait for men to finish talking when animals needed drink." By the time they returned, the sky had gone flat and close again. The knock came before noon. Not careful, not angry, confident. Silas opened the door a handspan. A man stood there with snow on his shoulders and a paper held high enough to stay clean. "By order," he said, and smiled like he'd practiced. Bee read from where she stood. Her face did not change. "This one's already stayed," she said. The man shrugged. "New order." Silas said, "No." The man smiled wider. "Then we'll mark." They marked the gate with chalk, a white line on old wood. It looked like a promise and felt like a threat. They left without stepping inside. Mara scrubbed the chalk off with snow until her fingers burned. The mark faded, but did not disappear. She pressed the place with her thumb until the wood warmed. "I see you." Afternoon wore on. The wind picked up and pushed snow sideways. Bee wrote until her pencil shortened and her wrist ached. Silas split wood until the pile stood like a wall. Mara mended and mended again. She stitched the satchel seam tighter than before. She hid the needle in her sleeve. At dusk, hooves came. Not many. 2. A rider stopped short of the gate and did not dismount. He called out, voice smooth, "Sign and sleep." Silas did not step out. "Go home." The rider laughed. "It's Christmas week." Bee said, "So was yesterday." The rider's eyes slid to the window, where light leaked thin. "Children shouldn't be mixed in," he said. Mara moved to the door and stood beside Silas. She did not speak. She looked at the rider until he shifted. Silence does work. The rider tipped his hat and left. Night fell heavy. Snow pressed against the walls and listened. Inside, Bee read one line from the hymn book again. Just the line. Light finding cracks. Silas listened and did not argue. Mara lay by the stove and counted heat until it matched her breath. The road did not call her the way it used to. Habit kept her awake anyway. The crash came near midnight. Wood splitting wrong. A shout cut short. Silas was up and moving before sound finished. Bee grabbed the satchel. Mara followed, heart loud. At the pen, a fence lay down like it had decided to rest. A cow bawled and went quiet. Men moved beyond the trees, quick and wrong. Silas lifted the rifle and did not fire. Not yet. Bee shouted, "Sheriff!" The word carried. It broke something. A man swore. A horse slipped. Snow swallowed sound. They ran. Silas dropped to the fence and hauled it up. He tied wire with bare hands until blood warmed metal. Mara took the other end and pulled. She did not feel the cut. "I won't let go." The cow stood, shook, breathed. It lived. By the time the badge arrived with 2 men who wished they were elsewhere, the woods held only tracks that went nowhere useful. The badge looked at the fence and the blood and the chalk smear half scrubbed. He sighed. "We'll write it," he said. B said, "Do." Morning came raw and bright. The fence held. The trough froze and thawed and froze again. Silas hauled water until his shoulders burned. B wrote until the page filled and filled again. Mara counted boards and sticks and breaths. A wagon came at noon with the woman from before and a different crate. She did not smile this time. "Temporary," she said again, but softer. B read the paper and nodded. "Temporary," she said. "Good." The woman set the crate down and left without waiting. Inside were blankets and bread, and a small candle wrapped careful. Someone had tucked a note beneath it. No name, just a line. For the cold. B held the candle a moment longer than needed. She set it by the sprig and did not light it yet. The sky darkened early. Snow threatened again. Silas checked the latch twice. He checked it a third time and stopped himself. "Stay close tonight," he said. Mara nodded. She sat by the door and mended a glove that was not hers. She stitched steady. Her hands did not shake. The knock came again. One tap. A pause. One again. Silas opened the door a handspan. A man stood there without paper and without smile. He looked past Silas into the room like he owned the site. "Last chance," he said. B stepped forward and set the candle between them, unlit. "We're done with chances," she said. The man's eyes flicked to the candle and away. "You think light saves you?" "It shows things," B said. Mara spoke before fear could. "The creek bends," she said, "and freezes first." The man stared at her. The words had landed. He looked past them to the dark where water ran. "Not your worry," he said again. "It is," Mara said. "I drink." Silence leaned. Snow hissed. Somewhere a bell rang once and stopped. The man turned and walked away. He did not run. He did not look back. After, the house breathed. Silas closed the door and leaned on it. B lit the candle and set it by the window where it could be seen from the road. The flame wavered and held. They ate bread and soup. The stew was thin. It was enough. Later, B unfolded the hymn book to the folded page and read the whole verse this time. Not loud, not slow, just true. Silas listened with his head bowed but his eyes open. Mara watched the flame and counted its jumps. She thought of the fence and the creek and the chalk mark that would not quite go away. "I am still here." Outside, snow began again, soft and straight. The road waited. Inside, the light held. The storm did not leave. It settled. Snow came in layers, each quieter than the last, until the world forgot how far it used to be. The ranch shrank to what could be touched. Door, stove, table, fence. Mara fed the fire and counted sticks, then counted again because the numbers felt slippery. Outside, the candle in the window burned low and steady, a small promise that did not brag. Silas woke to the sound of wood sighing. He stood at the door and tested it with his shoulder. It held. He smiled without teeth and went for his coat. "We'll lose cattle if we wait," he said. B wrapped the satchel in oilcloth and tied it twice. She did not argue. Arguing cost heat. They moved slow and close. Snow climbed their legs and tried to keep them. The fence vanished where drift rose like a wall. Silas took the shovel and cut a path that was not straight, but worked. Mara followed with the rope and learned where to throw it by feel. Work first. At the pen, a cow lay down and did not want to stand. Silas spoke to it low and steady. Mara put her shoulder under its chest and pushed where the bone knew how to lift. The cow rose and breathed and lived, for now. They heard the wagon before they saw it. Wood on snow, a rhythm that did not belong to weather. Silas stilled. Bee stilled. Mara counted breaths until the sound came closer and stopped beyond the trees. A man called out, voice careful. "Help!" Silas did not answer. He lifted a hand and waited. Waiting was safer. The man called again, louder. "Wheels broke. We're stuck." Silas looked at Bea. She looked back. "Weather's doing their work," she said. The man stepped into sight with his hands open. Snow clung to his coat. He looked cold enough to be true. Behind him, a wagon leaned, wheel bent wrong. Silas said, "Stay there." The man nodded and did not move. That mattered. They worked the rope and the jack and the wheel came free. The man thanked them too much. He looked at the house. He looked at the candle. He looked away. "Town's watching," he said, as if it were advice. Bee said, "So are we." The man left with his wheel mended and his questions unanswered. His tracks went straight. That mattered too. By noon, the snow turned sharp. Wind cut and then stopped, cut and stopped. The trough froze and thawed in turns that tired the arms. Silas hauled until his shoulders burned. Bee took notes until the pencil shortened again. Mara stitched a tear and stitched another. She hid the needle back in her sleeve. The knock came with the light failing. Not careful, not loud, just sure. Silas opened the door a handspan. The woman from the wagon stood there again, cheeks raw, eyes tired. "Temporary," she said, softer than before. "One night. The storm." Silas hesitated. The wind shoved her words into the room. Bee read the paper she held and nodded once. "One," she said. "By the stove." The woman stepped inside and took off her gloves. Her hands shook. She warmed them without speaking. She did not look at Mara. They ate bread and soup. The stew was thin. It was enough. The woman ate like she had been taught not to waste. She watched the candle and said nothing. After, Bee read a line from the hymn book. Not the whole, just the line. The woman closed her eyes when she heard it and opened them again like she had decided something. "I was told to watch," she said. The words fell like coins. "I was not told to freeze." Silas nodded. Sleep. Night pressed. Wind clawed. Snow packed the door until it sighed. The woman slept on the bench with her coat still on. Mara lay by the stove and counted heat until it matched her breath. "I won't leave." The crash came near dawn. Wood, shout, a horse screaming wrong. Silas was up and moving before thought finished. Bee grabbed the satchel. Mara followed with the rope already in her hands. At the gate, the chalk mark had been redrawn, thicker. A horse lay tangled in the fence, leg caught, breath wild. A man cursed and kicked snow. Another shouted orders that went nowhere. Silas took the knife and cut wire without waiting. Blood warmed his fingers. He did not notice. Mara held the horse's head and spoke to it low. The animal listened. It did not know why. B shouted for the badge, and the word carried because the wind paused to hear it. The men froze when the wire fell, and the horse stood shaking and alive. "Accident," one said, too quick. B said, "Attempt." The badge came with a face that had learned regret. He looked at the chalk and the wire and the horse and sighed. "We'll write it," he said. "Do," B said again. The men left without looking back. The woman watched them go and then took off the county pin from her coat and set it on the table. "I'm done watching," she said. Silas did not comment. He poured coffee and drank it hot. Morning broke thin and bright. The storm had spent itself. Snow lay deep and quiet. The road disappeared. The candle burned low. B wrote until the page filled and then filled another. "This buys us more than time," she said. "It buys witnesses." Silas nodded. "Witnesses get cold." Mara took the shovel and cut a path to the gate. She found the chalk again and scraped it off with ice until the wood showed. The mark faded but did not disappear. She pressed it with her thumb until it warmed. "I see you." A wagon came near noon with bread and blankets and a crate marked with no name. The driver did not stop long. He tipped his hat and left. Inside the crate lay a lantern with a clean globe and a note folded once. "For nights like this." B set the lantern by the door and did not light it yet. That afternoon, the man with clean gloves did not come. Another did. He brought paper and a look that practiced kindness too hard. "Settlement," he said. Silas read it and shook his head. "No." The man smiled. "You'll change your mind." Mara stood and felt the room tilt. "I can do this." She pointed to the paper. "That line," she said, "it takes the bend." The man blinked. "Child," B cut in. "She's right." Silence learned the room. The man left with his paper and his smile folded small. At dusk, the bell rang once and stopped. The sound came clean now, not thin. Someone practiced a carol again, braver than before. A window down the road showed light where there had been none. B lit the lantern and set it by the window beside the candle. 2 lights now. Not loud. Enough. They ate beans and bread. B read the verse again and then closed the book. "That's enough," she said. Silas set 3 bowls and then added a 4th. He did not hesitate. He did not explain. Mara sat by the stove and counted the heat until it matched her breath. She thought of the road buried under snow, and the gate scraped clean, and the horse standing alive. "I am still here." Outside, the night pressed and found the fence held. Inside, the light held too. Morning brought a lie of blue. The sky cleared so fast it felt like an apology. Snow lay deep and clean, the kind that makes men believe trouble has frozen solid. Mara fed the stove and counted sticks. She counted twice and stopped herself. Numbers could trick you when the air went bright. Silas stepped out and tested the latch. It held. He walked the fence line slow, boot finding the old path by memory. The chalk was gone. The wire held where it had been tied too tight, and then tighter. He nodded once, a man agreeing with nothing. B spread the papers to dry again, though they were dry already. Habit steadied her hands. "Clear days make people bold," she said. "They think they can be seen." Silas poured coffee and drank it hot. "Let them." The lantern stayed by the window. The candle burned low beside it. 2 lights. Enough. They went to town because that's what men expect you not to do after storms. The road had narrowed to a trough between walls of white. A wagon passed and did not slow. Faces turned and did not look. Inside the hall, benches scraped. The badge stood where he had stood before, shoulders set like he had decided to stop pretending. The man with clean gloves was not there. Another man took his place and tried on the same smile. "Settlement," the man said, and slid paper across. "Seasonal." B did not touch it. "Read it." He did. His voice stumbled on a line and found it again. He finished and waited. Silas said, "No." The man smiled. "You'll reconsider." Mara watched his shoes. Mud there. Creek mud. Fresh. She looked up and met his eyes. He looked away first. Silence does work. B leaned forward. "Where did you haul this morning?" The man blinked. "Excuse me?" "The mud," B said. "Upstream or down?" The room leaned. The badge shifted. The man laughed too quick. "Coincidence." Mara spoke before fear could argue. "The bend freezes first," she said. "You didn't go there." The man's smile thinned. He gathered his paper and stood. "We'll be back." Outside, the bell rang once and stopped. Not a call. A marker. They walked home with the sun high and cold. Snow glittered like it wanted credit. Mara counted steps anyway. Habit kept you upright. At the gate, a sled waited. Not town, not clean. A crate sat on it with rope tied careful. A note lay on top, folded once. Open. Silas looked at B. B looked at the rope. "Open," she said. Inside were sacks of grain and salt and a pair of mittens stitched with a thumb too small for a grown hand. Mara picked them up and felt the warmth they remembered. She set them by the stove and did not ask who. That afternoon, men did not come. Weather did. Wind rose and dropped and rose again. Snow hissed along the ground and filled old tracks. Silas split wood and stacked it higher. B wrote until the pencil was almost gone. Mara mended and mended again. Near dusk, a knock came that did not want an answer. 3 taps, spaced like a test. Silas opened the door a handspan. The man without paper stood there again. No smile. No gloves this time. His hands were red and raw. "Last chance," he said. B stepped into the light. "You said that yesterday." He nodded. "Deadlines move." Mara stood beside Silas and did not speak. She held the mittens in her hands and let them be seen. The man's eyes flicked to them and away. "Tomorrow," he said, and left. Night came early. B lit the lantern and set it beside the candle. 2 lights held steady. She read from the hymn book. Not the line she always chose. Another this time, about doors. She closed the book and said nothing more. Mara lay by the stove and counted heat until it matched her breath. "I won't leave." The thought sat heavy and right. The crash came in the deep of night. Not fence. Glass. Silas was up and moving before sound finished. B grabbed the satchel. Mara followed with the rope already in her hands. At the shed, a window lay in pieces. Snow had blown in and covered footprints, but not all. A box was open and empty. The place where it had sat showed a clean square in dust. "They took copies," B said, breath sharp. "Not originals." Silas nodded. "They're scared." "Good," B said. They swept glass and nailed a board across the window. Mara held the lamp and learned where to place light so hands did not slip. She did not cut herself. She noticed that. Morning came hard and bright again. The road woke. Wagons moved. Town sent its sounds out early. The badge arrived alone at mid-morning. He took his hat off and held it. "They tried to move it," he said, "up the chain." B nodded. "They will." Silas said, "And you?" The badge exhaled. "I'm tired of chalk." They went to town together. The hall filled faster than usual. People stood because sitting would mean staying. The man without gloves stood at the front now. The clean one still did not come. B laid the papers down and said nothing. Silence carried the room farther than words. The man cleared his throat. "By order," B raised a hand. "Before you read," she said, "we'll show." She set the jars down. Clear water. Tainted water. The room knew the difference now. She set the map down. She set the hymn book down and opened it to the page where the paper had pressed its shadow. Mara stepped forward. Her heart kicked once and settled. "I can do this." "Third shelf," she said. "Left hinge. The box sticks." The man's face changed. The badge looked where she pointed. "Open it," he said. They did. Again. The box gave up its teeth and its copies and the reason men had been knocking at night. The room made a sound like a door closing. The man without gloves sat. He did not speak again. Outside, the bell rang. Once, then twice. It sounded like a choice. They walked home under a sky that did not apologize. Snow held. The gate held. The trough held clear. Inside, Silas set 3 bowls and then added a 4th. He did not hesitate. He did not explain. B tied the satchel and smiled like someone who had set a bone right. "This ends the pressure," she said. "Not the watching." Silas nodded. "Watching I can handle." Mara put the mittens on and warmed her hands. She looked at the door and the window and the fence and saw them all at once. "I am still here." Night came soft. The lantern and the candle burned together. 2 lights. Enough. Outside, the road waited. Inside, the flame held. The ending did not arrive like a knock. It came like a wait. Morning settled low and gray, the kind that presses without noise. Snow held its shape, clean and honest, and the creek ran dark beneath its skin. Mara fed the stove and counted sticks. She did not count twice this time. She had learned when not to. Silas stood at the door and listened. Nothing came. That worried him more than hooves. B finished tying the satchel and did not untie it again. "They won't knock," she said. "They'll decide." Silas nodded. "Then we meet them standing." They went to town because that's where decisions pretended to be clean. The road felt shorter. The sky watched. Inside the hall, the air was different. Not loud, not quiet. Settled. Benches filled and stayed filled. Coats came off. Hats were held instead of worn. The badge stood at the front, with his hands empty and his jaw set, like he had practiced in the mirror and stopped caring. The man with clean gloves was there this time. He did not smile. He did not sit. He stood apart, ring dark against pale skin. B laid the papers down and stepped back. She did not speak. Silence learned the room. The badge cleared his throat. "We're here to close a matter," he said. The word close made a few men shift. The man with gloves stepped forward. "There's been confusion," he said. "Weather, timing." Silas stood. "Animals died." The man nodded once, too quick. "Regrettable." B said, "Intentional." A murmur moved, not loud, not angry, curious. The man with gloves lifted his hands. "Business," he said again, like the word could still save him. Mara felt the seam of her coat and found nothing sharp there anymore. The paper had left her. The knowledge stayed. She stepped forward, and the bench creaked. The sound made her heart kick once and then settle. "I can do this." "Sir," she said. The word stopped the room. "You keep saying business, but water isn't." The man laughed, short. "Child," she did not raise her voice. "The bend freezes first," she said. "You knew that. That's why you touched it." B lifted the map and held it where the light showed the pencil lines she had drawn by memory and by cold. "The freeze line," she said. "Here, and here, and here." The man with gloves stared at the map as if it might change for him. It did not. The badge said, "We have statements." A boy with a limp stood. He did not look up. "I drove," he said. "I was paid." Another man stood, older, a shopkeeper who had watched too much and spoken too little. "He asked for jars," he said. "Said it was for tests." The room leaned forward. Not far. Enough. The man with gloves sat. He smoothed his hat without meaning to. "This is going nowhere," he said. B stepped closer. "It already has." She set the jars down. Clear. Tainted. Clear again. She did not explain. She did not have to. Silas said nothing. His hands were flat on the table. They were steady. The badge took a breath and let it go. "By authority vested," he began, and the words felt heavy and right. "We suspend the seizure. We refer the matter." The man with gloves stood fast. "You can't." The badge met his eyes. "I can." The room made a sound like relief that did not trust itself yet. Outside, the bell rang. Once it did not stop. They walked out together. The air felt different. Not warm, clear. On the steps, the woman from the wagon waited again. She held no crate this time. She held nothing. "It's done?" she asked. B nodded. "For now." The woman exhaled and smiled like someone who had been holding a lie too long. "Good," she said, and went away without looking back. They walked home slow. The road did not pull Mara anymore. She counted steps anyway. Habit had made a home in her. At the gate, Silas stopped. He rested his hand on the post and did not move. "They'll watch," he said. B nodded. "Let them." Inside, the house felt bigger. Not because it was, because it held. Silas split wood once and stopped. He set the axe down and did not pick it up again. He poured coffee and drank it hot. He did not rush. B untied the satchel and laid the papers out one last time. She stacked them neat and slid them into the drawer that stuck unless you lifted. She lifted, It slid. Mara set bowls on the table. 3. She paused. She added a fourth without thinking. The thought came after. She left it anyway. They ate. The stew was thin. It was enough. After, Bea opened the hymn book and read the line she had not read yet, the one about shelter. She closed the book and did not read again. Silas stood and went to the door. He opened it wide. Cold came in and did not bite. He closed it and leaned there a moment, eyes shut. "Mara," he said, and used her name like it mattered. She looked up. "You don't go," he said. She nodded. The nod was small and final. "I won't leave." Bea smiled without showing teeth. "We'll make it proper," she said. "Papers, names." Silas nodded. In the spring. Night came soft. Snow fell like it had finished arguing. The lantern burned. The candle burned beside it. 2 lights. Enough. Mara sat by the stove and counted the heat until it matched her breath. She thought of the road that had brought her, and the gate that had kept her, and the water that still ran clear. She thought of the word stay and how it had weight now. Outside, the bell rang again, once, then twice, then stopped. Inside, the flame held. Winter did not end. It loosened. Morning came pale and quiet, the kind that doesn't hurry you. Snow still lay deep, but it had learned how to hold. Mara fed the stove and counted sticks. She stopped at the right number without checking herself. That felt new. Silas stood at the window with his mug cooling in his hands. He watched the creek line where steam lifted faint and honest. The water ran clear. It had kept its word. Bea packed the satchel for the last time and did not tie it shut. She set it on the table and left it open like a thing that no longer needed guarding. The hymn book lay beside it, the page no longer folded. "They'll send papers," Bea said. "Official ones." Silas nodded. "I'll sign." Mara looked up. "You don't have to." Silas met her eyes. He did not look away. "I want to." They went out together. The fence held. The wire stayed tight where small hands had pulled it tighter than it needed to be. The trough shone. No chalk, no marks. Just wood and iron doing their jobs. A wagon came near noon. Not fast, not careful, honest. The badge climbed down alone and took his hat off before he reached the gate. He did not smile. He did not need to. "It's finished," he said. "Land stays, water stays, charges filed." Silas nodded once. "Thank you." The badge glanced at Mara and hesitated. Then he nodded to her too, like she was part of the ground now. "You did good," he said, awkward and sincere. Mara did not know what to do with praise. She nodded back. Habit helped. The badge left. The road swallowed him without fuss. Inside, Bea laid the papers out and went through them slow. Not because they were hard, but because she liked the sound they made when they agreed with each other. "Temporary guardianship," she said. "Immediate." Mara's breath caught. She put her hands flat on the table until it passed. "I am still here." Silas picked up the pen. He held it like it might bite. Then he signed. The sound of ink moving felt louder than the bell had ever been. Bea slid the papers back into the satchel and finally tied it shut. "I'll stay through the thaw," she said. "After that," Silas shook his head, "you stay as long as you want." Bee smiled, real this time. Then I'll stay. Afternoon brought light that did not glare. Snow softened. Somewhere down the road, someone practiced a carol badly and did not stop when they missed a note. A window across the field held a candle even though it was daylight. Old habits took time to leave. Mara swept the floor without being asked. She washed bowls and set them to dry. She found the mittens by the stove and put them on, then took them off again to hang where they would dry better. She moved through the house like she knew its bones. Silas split wood once more and stopped. He leaned the axe where it belonged and did not reach for it again. He watched Mara and did not interrupt. At dusk, Bee lit the lantern and set it by the window out of habit. Then she hesitated and moved it back. The candle stayed. One light was enough now. They ate. Bread, beans, apples cut thin. The stew was still thin. It was enough. After, Bee opened the hymn book and closed it again without reading. She slid it onto the shelf where books went when they were done teaching. Silas cleared his throat. He did not do it often. "Spring," he said. "There's a school 2 towns over." Mara looked at him. Fear rose and fell and did not take root. "I can still work." "I know," Silas said. "You will." Bee said, "You'll read too." Mara nodded. Both felt possible now. Night came gentle. Snow fell once more, soft and straight, like it was finishing a thought. Silas checked the latch once and stopped himself from checking again. "Mara," he said. And the way he said it was different. Not careful. Certain. "You want to stay?" She answered without thinking. "Yes." He nodded. "Then you stay." Bee watched them and said nothing. Mara lay by the stove and counted the heat until it matched her breath. She did not count steps anymore. She counted days ahead instead. "I am home." Outside, the road waited, as it always would. Inside, the flame held without guarding. The creek ran clear. The fence stood. Winter loosened its grip and did not argue. The bell rang once in the distance. This time it sounded like an ending.